For more on this, let's speak to Council for the Advancement of the South African Constitution Executive Secretary, and that's Lawson Naidoo. A very good evening to you, Mr. Naidoo. Thanks very much for your time. There is merit, I would imagine, in the argument by your UDMs, BOSAs, your ATMs, and ACDP that if the talk is of building a unity, a government, then it should be all-inclusive.
Good evening, thank you. The ANC have announced last week that they would prefer to have a government of national unity and have made an offer to political parties to engage in discussions around that. And that's something we'll have to see how that plays out over the coming days in terms of which parties might be willing to participate and on what basis they might be willing to participate in such a government of national unity. I think it's clear from the election result, with no political party having secured a majority, that it is in fact the wish of the electorate for political parties to cooperate and work together to try and address the many crises that face South Africa at this point in time.
But then, the ANC has said that it wants to speak to everybody, but they've named the parties that they have spoken to so far, and it was on the back of that these other small parties then wrote to the Chief Justice asking him to convene a meeting that will be all-inclusive.
Yeah, well, I think I think it's rather strange to me that we would seek to engage the Chief Justice as the head of the judiciary to deal with what is essentially a political issue that needs to be resolved amongst leaders of political parties. I really do not think that it's appropriate for the Chief Justice to get involved in matters such as this. These are inherently political discussions that need to take place between leaders of political parties. And I think one of the things that we need to see is a level of maturity from our political leadership to be able to sit around the table and agree on the mechanisms, the governance mechanisms that are going to be in place for the next 5 years. So I really don't think that it's advisable for the Chief Justice to become involved in a process such as that.
Mm-hmm. Do you sense, or do you feel that there is that level of maturity from what we've heard so far? What has been statements made by your EFF, statements made by your Democratic Alliance, even the ANC itself. Do you get a sense that they are approaching these conversations with a great deal of maturity?
Well, probably not the kinds of levels of maturity that we'd like to see. And I think many of the political parties and the leadership, their own constituencies, and trying to set out their positions to ensure that they retain the support of those voters that voted for them and the membership of the parties that they lead. So I think there is a lot of positioning. Some would call it grandstanding even at the moment. But I think at the end of the day, political parties are going to have to sit around the table and realize that in negotiations, nobody is going to get everything that they want from those negotiations. That there's going to have to be compromise, and they have to put the interests of the country first. And I think for them to use the Constitution to create a program and to agree upon a program of action that begins to address the economic and social challenges that we face.
Okay, Lawson, I'm going to ask you to hold your thoughts right there. We're going to take a quick ad break and try and fix your line. News Prime continues in a minute. Don't go away. We're still speaking to the Council for the Advancement of South African Constitution's Executive Secretary, and that's Lawson Naidoo. Hopefully, your line will hold this time around, Lawson. Just to finish a point, when you were saying, you doubt whether the Chief Justice Raymond Zondo is or should be that person, if indeed this is a route that needs to be taken. Professor Thuli Madonsela earlier suggested that maybe someone else, maybe a retired justice, if indeed this is the how these things should be, these parties should go about doing this.
Yeah, look, if we are, I really don't think that, either a sitting judge or a retired judge is really best placed to try and, facilitate discussions amongst political role players. These are inherently political choices that have to be made. The political leadership of the country needs to be able to take those decisions. If they require some external facilitation, I think, one would not have a problem with that. But I think to try and involve members of the judicial arm of the state in these political negotiations would be a mistake that we might come to regret at a later stage.
I mean, one is looking.
If, for example, that might well compromise whichever judge has participated in this process.
But then, if you, you mentioned political maturity, and I was looking at some of the reasons that have been advanced by certain parties for rejecting others. The EFF says it wants a coalition arrangement with like-minded parties and no DA. You have the MK party saying they don't want Cyril Ramaphosa. You have Action SA saying the voters have rejected the ANC, so it shouldn't form part of any arrangement.
Yeah, as I say, those are, positions that political parties are taking. I think the reality that has to be accepted is that despite suffering significant losses, the African National Congress still remains the largest political party. The Democratic Alliance is the second largest political party. That if we are going to have a government of national unity, as has been proposed by the ANC, then it needs to include the largest parties that are represented in Parliament. So I think for some political parties to refuse to work with others simply on the basis of an ideological disposition is not likely to take us forward.
Have you gotten any sense from those that have made statements publicly that they are approaching this whole issue not only with the political maturity that you believe it deserves, but also there's greater strategic thinking. In other words, there's an appreciation of what is at stake. Do you get that sense?
Well, at the moment, from their public statements, one doesn't get that sense. But we also happen to know that there are discussions that are taking place behind closed doors. And we've not been privy to the nature of those discussions, whether they're more realistic, whether parties are taking a more, a realistic line in terms of what's possible, which of their sort of red line issues are acceptable to other parties, and so on. And I think those are the kinds of issues that need to be discussed. And if necessary, if they discuss behind closed doors, and ultimately a proposal is presented to the country in terms of this is the way that the political parties have decided, then I think that's fine. But we've got to, separate the political grandstanding public sphere in comparison to what those discussions, as I say, behind closed doors may actually entail.
Of course, the last time we had a government of national unity, or when we first had a government of national unity, that government was led by an ANC that had been victorious. Do you think that fundamentally changes how it's going to approach, or it is approaching, the government of national unity this time around?
Well, we must recall, that the government of national unity that was established in 1994 was legislated. It was in the interim constitution. So there was a constitutional basis for that government of national unity. with even to the extent of spelling out how the allocation of seats in cabinet would be determined. And as we recall, back then the ANC, had the president and one of the two deputy presidents, 18 seats in cabinet. The National Party, I think, had 6 and the IFP 3. Now the Constitution, makes no such provision. And in fact, what the Constitution now does say is that there is only one deputy president. So the suggestions that have been mooted about, us moving to 2 deputy presidents is not likely now, because there's a constitutional prohibition against that. So we have to work within the realms of what the law and the Constitution provides. And certainly we can draw lessons from the experience that we had in 1994 in terms of some aspects of the formation of that government of national unity. But it's not legislated, and we will have to use the wisdom of the leadership to craft such an arrangement now that's going to be workable at this point in time, rather than what was workable back in 1994, where, let's not forget, the ANC had an overwhelming majority in that 1994 election.
With that background, then, Lawson, and given the fact that this time around the ANC's hand is in fact forced, do you see them being a little more generous, perhaps, given the set of circumstances that they're facing?
Well, I think they're going to have to be generous, whether they need to be more generous or not, because I think the ANC was probably quite generous already in the 1990s, as I say, on the basis that they had won an overwhelming majority in that election, but recognized that the political moment required a period of nation building, a period of building confidence amongst a very divided society back in the early 90s. And that was the route that was chosen. The issues that confront us now may be slightly different, but if one looks at the scale of the economic inequality, the social justice deficits that we face, that this is a time of crisis, and it needs calm, wise heads to come together to chart a way forward so that we can, in fact, begin to realize the vision and dream of the Constitution itself.
I mean, the DA's preference for such roles as Speaker, Deputy Speaker, chairpersons of committees, and so on. Just your thoughts on whether or where, assuming the ANC agrees to that, where that will put the DA as a political party.
Yeah, well, look, some of these proposals are not new. As you will recall, the report of the Zondo Commission made some recommendations, for example, regarding opposition MPs chairing portfolio committees in the National Assembly, the issue of, the ANC dominating all of the presiding officer positions in the National Assembly have been, under scrutiny for some time. One goes back to the earlier years of Parliament. There were always at least 1 or 2 members of opposition parties amongst the presidium of presiding officers in Parliament, both in the National Assembly and the NCOP. As Parliament is defined as a multi-party institution in our Constitution, we need to see that work in reality. And if there's a sharing of presiding officer positions between the main political parties, as well as that of the portfolio committees and other positions in Parliament, then I think we might actually see a more effective Parliament that is going to be required to hold, whether it's a government of national unity, a coalition government, or even a minority government, to hold that government to account. So I think this is really an opportunity to really strengthen its institutional foundations and to really do the job that the Constitution envisages for it. I think if we reflect again on the Zondo Commission report, it was very scathing of the role that Parliament had played, or in fact had failed to play in arresting state capture. So this may well provide an opportunity for Parliament to begin to reassert itself as the primary political institution in our democracy.
KwaZulu-Natal, of course, presents a very unique case, and it's going to be interesting to see what comes out of conversations around that province.
Indeed, provinces where there's no party with an overall majority. The MK party is the largest party there. If you look at the seat allocations to the different political parties, a coalition is not going to be easy there either. And, parties are going to have to make strategic choices as to whether there's a level of cooperation, not just at a level of national government, but also at a provincial government level, particularly in those provinces such as KwaZulu-Natal and Gauteng, where there is no party with an absolute majority. So, we'll see how that plays out. But KZN in particular is very delicately balanced.
Do you think there has been, or these political parties have learned any valuable lessons from what has happened, especially in the country's metropolitan municipalities?
Well, one hopes that they have, and they recognize the dangers of replicating that kind of instability that we've seen at a local government level, of that being replicated at the national level, because the impact that it could have on our country could be really devastating. It's devastating already at a local government level with the collapse of service delivery in many of those unstable metropolitan councils in particular. So again, we've got to appeal to that wise leadership for calm, sensible minds to prevail and to really put the interests of the country first, particularly with the background of this recent election, which basically shared power, or was calling for a sharing of power amongst different political parties. So that coming together of really putting the country first, putting the constitution first, and setting aside some of, if not all of your ideological differences at overarching goal.
And I was bringing the issue of municipalities into the conversation because the way, Salga, for example, came up with some proposals around how to deal with some of the challenges posed by coalition governments, especially in the metros. But that doesn't let the buy-in of the political players there. One wonders then whether, in fact, these people have learned any lessons from what has been happening in the metros.
Yeah, well, I think what we've seen at local government level here was the playing out of transactional engagements in terms of the formation of coalitions that have proved to be unstable because they've not been policy guided, if you like, but really rather about horse trading of different positions in those municipalities, be it speaker or other positions within mayors and so on. And we've seen in some occasions, such as in Johannesburg, the leader of one of the smallest parties in the coalition assuming the office of mayor. And, if that party has a change of mind, or one of the other parties in the coalition has a change of mind, you then have a change in the leadership, which creates tension, it creates instability, and it loses, the confidence of the community in those municipalities of these political parties to work together. And so, there's a healthy level of skepticism, I would say, in that regard. You've mentioned the proposals from Salga. I think the Department of Cooperative Governance just a couple of weeks ago has tabled draft legislation to try and create a legal framework for coalitions at a municipal level. But it's not something that is going to impact on the national level of government. So whilst there are lessons to be learned from the local government experience, I think the absence of any kind of legal basis for these coalitions at a national level means that there's limited value in terms of what can be taken.
Lawson, Naidoo, thank you very much for your time.